Well, we're joined now by a panel of four to discuss this. Former Met Police Chief Superintendent Babu, Yvonne Ridley, who converted to Islam after being captured by the Taliban, Gifford, who travelled to Syria to fight with the Kurdish military against IS, and Moazzam Begg, a former Guantanamo Bay prisoner. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for coming in. Macy, if I can start with you, you've got no contact or connections with what was happening in Syria, but you just felt like that you needed to get out there. What was your experience of going and fighting IS firsthand?
Well, I think we all know what it was like back in 2014 to see ISIS rise, of all those young Yazidi girls in cages, young boys and men in ditches, just ISIS cutting a swathe of violence throughout the Middle East. And I just wanted to go out. I wanted to stand in solidarity with Syrian people and just fight against them. ISIS is a repulsive organisation, and they have done terrible things to Syrian people. I've seen entire communities wiped out, and I've seen dozens of my own friends die, thousands of local fighters die fighting against them. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a difficult conflict.
So when it comes to the idea of Shamima Begum, a young girl who at 15, with two friends, ran away to be a part of what she saw as something for the future for her, realising a few years later, 4 years later potentially, as a pregnant young lady, that it's all fallen apart and actually she needs to come back home. What are your thoughts about whether we should welcome her back here or bring her back under certain sort of security restrictions?
Well, just as I said, as I was motivated to go out and fight ISIS by those images, and as people at home were horrified, she was motivated by them. She wanted to go out and support ISIS. She saw all the same things that we did. And so she went out. She was part of the ISIS machine that persecuted Christians and Yazidis. As we heard from the report, she has no remorse for her actions. And there is no evidence whatsoever that she's any less dangerous today.
She was just 15 at the time, very easily influenced, groomed, as they say online, and got there,
responsibility.
But got there and realised what she'd been sold was nothing like the reality.
Well, she hasn't shown any remorse, and she radicalised herself. I don't like the idea that she's somehow a victim. The real victims are the people that ISIS have butchered over the years, like the 3,000 young Yazidi girls that are still missing and that we hear very little about. And the fact that this girl is British and she joined the Islamic State, she gets more airtime than them.
Dal, perhaps unsurprisingly, Shamima's family want her home. You have dealt with the family quite a lot, haven't you, after they went, and have looked into how she became radicalised and worked with them. What are your thoughts? Should she come back?
Well, I mean, I dealt with all three families, and essentially what had happened was that originally one girl had gone across to Syria. She was then working with other ISIS fighters, a brutal regime that threw gay people off buildings, butchered people. But she was there. She was encouraging other girls to come across. One girl actually got as far as getting onto an aeroplane. Then the three girls from Bethnal Green then basically actually went via Turkey there. And basically what had happened was families had not been told what was happening.
So you think the police here in the UK sensed that there was some radicalising going on of these girls and actually at one point approached them but didn't alert the families?
Now, what they did, and I think it was a catastrophic, awful decision, they gave a letter to the girls saying that they were concerned about radicalisation and wanted the letter to go to the parents. The letter was subsequently found in the girls' school bag. So these were 15-year-old children who were being radicalised on the internet. So
do you think it's maybe because they were concerned that the family was part of the radicalisation process at the time?
Yes, I think you're right. I think what was happening was we've had a lot of discussion about the internet, but the extremists were using the internet much earlier than sort of the paedophiles and the other undesirable individuals that were doing it.
So, Dal, so understanding what the background of that and you having spoken to the family and realising what going on, do you think that she should be coming back? Is she
in a way,
victim?
if it's partly our responsibility and the handling of it at the time, does that add to your feeling of what?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think ultimately the security services will make an assessment on that. So I think what we need to do is understand the backstory and look at the failures that all of us had in terms of not dealing with her vulnerability at the time. I mean, I don't know the details of what she did, but you also have to remember when you interview somebody like that, she's in that camp. She's with other individuals who are families of ISIS, families there. So, you know, you're not talking about an individual who's been given advice and guidance to talk to the media.
Yvonne, you're nodding at that. You, of course, know what it's like to have been captured by a force at the time was the enemy, the Taliban, and you subsequently converted to Islam because of your time with them. What do you make of her? I mean, obviously, should she come home, but also what do you make of the fact that she doesn't appear to be showing any kind of remorse or regret other than the fact that it's collapsed and she'd like to actually come home now, please?
Well, we're talking about a child who was groomed. That's essentially what happened. She went out there. She's saying that she doesn't have any regrets, but we have to remember she's in a refugee camp now with 39,000 other people. She was a member of this, what is essentially a death cult. Goodness knows how many eyes are on her.
She's still in the camp in Syria at the moment, isn't she?
Yes, and she's been brutalised by war. We don't know what she's gone through. We don't know if she feels fearful, if she's under threat. And, you know, apart from this catastrophic failure that we've heard about from the education and the police, we also have to recognise that she could really help the intelligence services as well and help us all understand what were the triggers.
We don't know as well
that made her
the go, which is understanding that would be crucial, but we don't know what sort of threat that she remains to have. If she got those eyes on her, there could be people manipulating and say, if you get back to the UK, we can get you into the UK.
This is very true, but as she's been radicalised, she can be de-radicalised. Some of the Scandinavian countries have excellent de-radicalisation programmes. It's something that we should consider. She is a British citizen. She's our problem. You know, we've got an excellent legal system in this country.
You're not alone, though, is she? There could be many, and it could be the start of a very big process.
Well, I've just recently returned from Syria, and I met a number of Brits who were out there, like Mesa, who felt compelled to go out and help the Syrian people, not as fighters, but some of them have had their passports removed. You know, Britain has to accept responsibility.
Okay.
Let's bring Moazzam in, because Moazzam, you experienced life in Guantanamo Bay, and I imagine within Guantanamo Bay, and there are all sorts of problems with what was going on there, not least your arrest and imprisonment there would have been people, I would imagine, in a similar situation to Shamima, went out very young children who are growing up as teenagers. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I was held with young teenagers from the age of 14 to 15. Some were terribly wounded, some were Western citizens. Now, they ended up there because of decisions by their parents and so forth, and ended up in prison for 12, 13 years without charge or trial in some cases, facing torture and abuse. I think it's important in the case of Shamima that we say, though we keep repeatedly saying she's unrepentant, how has that been interrogated by a short interview by the Times? She also says, and I think we cherry-pick what's been said, she also says that the Islamic State didn't deserve victory because of the abuses they were carrying out. And I think, why hasn't that been reported? Because that
I think it has. I've read that too.
Yeah,
I think there's something about the tone of her voice that made people think, oh, she didn't sound fearful. I mean, this again could be because she's having to put on a performance. At the end of the day, though, if she is going to be still under some form of control, even fear, Ben's point from before, is it better that she comes home and therefore it negates a potential threat rather than allowing her to go out into the world?
I believe the French have just announced that they're going to bring back about 150 ISIS supporters or prisoners. And, you know, they have, I'm sure they want to prosecute them. It's not to bring them and throw them out on the streets. I myself was in Syria in 2012, 2013. I know many people who've been executed by ISIS, personal friends of mine, so I have no compunction at all in condemning what they've done. But really the issue here in relation to this young girl is, you know, will she be a threat? Well, she's heavily pregnant at the moment. By the time she comes back, if she comes back around now, she'll be giving birth.
What about the fact that people say, and she made a bed, she might have been 15 then, she's 19 now.
Yeah.
She's got to lie in it. We need to send a signal to the world so that other youngsters don't think they can go off and come back. We need to send a signal to the world not to do it.
What signal are we sending to the world? That we're just using the world as a dumping ground for our problems? You know, Britain has to take ownership of this problem. There are said to be hundreds of so-called ISIS fighters.
But if these young people who are being radicalised or being groomed understood the reality, if they leave, if they go to these places, if they join these groups, they won't be allowed
no route back.
There's no route back.
But people are not going. People have realised they're being groomed on the internet, and I think that.
But also the reality of ISIS has crumbled.
Absolutely,
as well,
I think, and that's precisely the point I'm going to make, is that it's gone from having vast swathes of the Middle East to a slither, one village. So ISIS is finished.
But that's not the problem at the moment. The problem is we've got a lot of people waiting to come back. 3 days ago, I was talking to an intelligence officer from the Kurdish YPG, and he said to me that most of the jihadis being held in the camps have been briefed quite well by ISIS, simply to say we were doctors, we were humanitarians, we didn't mean to come here, we made a terrible mistake. And the narrative is, or the idea is, that they'll come back to the West and restart the conflict. ISIS is going back to what it was before the conflict began. It's becoming a sort of a sinister terrorist organisation. Exactly, very hard to pin down. So this young lady is an incredibly dangerous young woman, and the narrative that's been spun by certain people saying that she's somehow a victim when she did a lot of planning to go out there. She's 19 years old. She's not the young girl
that will be a huge worry for people, Moazzam, won't it? That actually she was very manipulated to get out there. She's still in a situation, she's very vulnerable, she's pregnant. And actually, if there are people and if there is ISIS around, they are saying, look, now, think about this carefully. We need to get you back to your home country, somewhere in Europe, so then you can control the narrative from there and build out again.
I just think sometimes we seem to lose our connection to history. We're a country that's dealt with 3,000 people killed by the IRA in Britain. We have a series of anti-terror legislation in this country, the likes of which we've never had. We've had a prevent programme which repeatedly failed these girls.
We've also had terrorist attacks which have killed hundreds of people.
No, exactly.
Where we've said afterwards, we weren't suspicious of this person, why was nothing done? We've said it time and time again.
So
if we let this
exactly
girl or a number of girls back,
that's exactly my point. So we've got the prevent programme, actually, that is being implemented by law.
It's been shown to have failed, hasn't it?
And
that's
my point. So we passed law after law after law in this country. We just had a law passed 2 days ago, again, with the Counter-Terrorism and Security Border Act, which makes it a terrorist entity if you just go to a particular region. Okay. So, I mean, what are we doing? We're changing the face of our country in the name of trying to fight something that we've already been fighting for decades.
We could keep talking about this. Obviously, it's a very emotive subject. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the time being. The Home Office have told us that everyone who returns from taking part in conflict in Syria and Iraq must expect to be investigated to determine if they have committed criminal offences and ensure that they do not pose a threat to national security. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts. The majority of our viewers as well, it has to be said, Kate, don't believe that she should be allowed back. They do
I think that's an emotional response to the sort of horrors that you were talking about.
View.
Yeah. Well, here is Alex now.